So this next portion of the day, I'm really looking forward to. Keeping with the spirit of appreciative inquiry, we thought it would be very valuable for us to have a common level of awareness about some varied perspectives in workforce development. So we asked several people who come from different backgrounds, from local health departments, from the state health department, from academic partners, from a funder, a state-based foundation, about their unique perspectives in workforce development, especially what are they excited about, looking forward to, what do they see ahead for them, building on things that they're already doing. So again, capturing the stories and looking for what are these assets, what can we build upon, what are we already doing, what do we have the opportunity to do more of in the future. So I think it's going to be a very, very good discussion this afternoon. We thought we'd have people come up about 4 at a time. I think we're going to hear from 12 individuals altogether. As you listen, just as you've done this morning a little bit, please listen for themes. After you hear all of this, later we're going to be asking you to think about what you've heard in these 12 segments, and then also putting that together with everything else you've heard throughout the day-to-day to think about what may we carry forward for the betterment of public health workforce in Kansas. So we're going to have another appreciative inquiry activity after this group presentation, but we'll give you more direction about that for a little bit. So we are going to lose some of our KPHA board members pretty quick. They have a meeting, so we are going to have those folks come up to be in this first segment. So I think that it will include Eldana, Brandon, Nick, and then also Tanya. So I'll pass the mic off to you in just a second, but what I think would be valuable for us, if you would, please, if you would, introduce yourself again and tell us where your current work, what your current work involves, what organization you come from, and then if you're going to be talking about an experience that relates to a broader organization, then if you could also talk about that relationship. So who you are, what you do, where you do it, and what you want to tell us about it.
Boy, that's a lot. Okay, well, I'm Eldana Chestnut, and I work for Johnson County Department of Health and Environment. I'm Child Care Licensing Division Director. My role today really is talking about KPHA and APHA. And it kind of does overlap a little bit. One of the things for workforce with me, like Shirley said, I think I've been on this committee with her and Suzanne from the beginning. And I've always found workforce to be very important. And one of my former staff knows, I've always said it's very important to continue to learn and grow, because if you don't continue to learn and grow, then you stagnate. So I've always put learning and continuing learning very high on the priorities with my own staff. Pardon me. And part of that does tie back to workforce, and the fact that if you continue to give people the opportunity to learn and grow and continue to expand, then you're going to increase your employee morale, and you're also going to increase your retention. So that's kind of a little simple facts. So my professional organizations that I'm talking about today, I'll start with KPHA and MINC. KPHA, obviously, Kansas Public Health Association. MINC is a Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas public health organization. Pardon me. We started several years ago, kind of got that group together, and it was the right people at the right place at the right time. And it was kind of a very good coming together of the minds, and that realizing that we can't do it all by ourselves, that we need to work with each other, and we need to build those peer relationships, and we need to figure out what resources we have and not reinvent the wheel. So to be in MINC, basically anybody that's a member of any of the 4 public health associations can be part of MINC, and they do have conferences on an annual basis, as well as usually try to get together at the APHA annual meeting. So with KPHA, talk a little bit about more that it's an individual membership. KPHA is the overarching public health association for Kansas. We cover everything related to public health. And so it's an individual membership. It's your opportunity to get involved and get engaged. And offers so many different things to you. And as far as the training, it's definitely growth opportunity. As we all know, conference is tomorrow or the next couple of days. So we have that. And occasionally in the past, we've had webinars, or we have other opportunities for training. And networking and resource sharing, that's one of the biggest things that you'll get out of a professional organization. And the fact that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I've used the example with mink that Kansas was very forefront with smoking, and so we had a lot of materials already created, and Iowa was a little bit behind us, but they were coming on board. So they were able to pick up our resources, include their data, and move forward. So it's using your friends, using your partners, using your affiliates. Also, advocacy is a very important part, as there's a lot of public health laws, and some of them do tie in very much with workforce, and the leadership opportunities. Some of the other quick past projects of KPHA were like the statutes book, the public health orientation manual, public health 101, and cultural competency videos. So all things that the organization put forth to be able to help educate our members and our workforce in Kansas. And then to go up a level would be APHA, which you heard Tom a little bit ago, who's one of our past presidents. And APHA, kind of very similar, offers training, a lot of webinars, and you get out of it what you put into it, is the best way to put it. So if you join as a member, you've got access to all this wealth of information. The sections offer webinars quite frequently, as well as the annual conference coming up in Philadelphia at the end of October, 1st of November. Encourage everybody to go. And truthfully, it's a conference that everybody should have the opportunity to, the benefit to attend at least once. And personally, I go every year, or several years now. But you can learn so much. There's topics on everything imaginable in public health. Plus the networking. You have the ability to have contacts across the country. I can pick up the phone right now. I could call Tom. I could call Joseph, another past president, Kamara Jones. I could call Dr. Georges Benjamin, our executive director. Because of my relationships with APHA and my growth ability in there, I've got a nationwide resource network. And go, what works for you all? What training do you do? Hey, do you have this training that I could use to bring here, or whatever type situation? Not just training, if I'm looking for policies and procedures. The affiliate online community, that is basically a web-based community to put your questions out. And we've used it with KPHA as well. Okay, how do you do this? Or what do you do in your state? And you just post it out there, and you've got all these people all across the country, actually an APHA member across the world, because we have some international members that then can respond to your questions. Advocacy, obviously have the access to policies, procedures, webinars, document, opt-ed. You've just got all these resources at your fingertips. So if you're trying to train somebody on advocacy, there's a whole lot of information for you. You just got a ton of resources. And then, of course, as I mentioned, leadership opportunities with both the organizations. And for me, I was asked to kind of share my leadership journey. And so basically, I started with KPHA on the KPHA board as a section chair. And then I moved up into the various different levels, up to director at large, and then on up to president, and past president, affiliate representative, governing council. It just kind of kept, I basically, except for secretary and treasurer, didn't want those. I had most of the offices and a lot of section chairs, a lot of committee work, a lot of involvement, and basically I got out of it what I put into it, which was a lot on both sides. But I felt that it was a great growth potential. It gave me so much opportunity to meet so many people, meet so many collaborative organizations, collaborative projects. And then that led right on into APHA, because the ARGC, which Megan is the ARGC now from Kansas. And so basically you're the representative at the APHA meeting at the governing council. You're the representative for your affiliate. So from there, that was my stepping stone into the council and affiliates, where I basically like a regional representative. So Region 7 that you've heard a lot today, I was the Region 7 representative, or the MINC representative to governing council. From there, chair, past chair, and then decided I wanted to continue to learn and grow and have the opportunities and resources. So I ran and was successfully elected to the APHA Executive Board, which I currently sit on. So it's not just my path, it can be your path. And that gives me so many opportunities and so many resources, and I can reach out to, for whatever I need, whether it be workforce, advocacy, policy direction, whatever I'm looking for. I have a whole nationwide of resources and friends to pull from. So I would just encourage you to really be engaged in your professional organizations, and that doesn't mean just local health. And that doesn't mean just state health, because we're all one team. And so I encourage all of you that have a love and a passion for public health like I do to become involved in your both your state and national organization. But thank you.
Hello? Okay, I wasn't sure if this was on or not. My name is Tanya Hundra. I'm the director of the University of Kansas Master of Public Health program. I'm director on the Kansas City campus. We also have a campus in Wichita. So in my role, I do a little bit of everything from recruiting and advising students once they are into the program, helping them navigate through to their internship, and I'm the faculty for their internship placements, and then their capstones as their last kind of culminating experience for the program. But then also, because we're a CEF accredited program, so that's the Council on Education for Public Health, we have criteria that we need to meet in order to maintain our accreditation status. So in addition to building the future public health workforce for the state and the region, we're also very concerned with and interested in engaging the current public health workforce. And hopefully one of the ways we can do that is through the Kansas Public Health Grand Rounds. That's gone through a long history of different shapes and forms. It started out many years ago as a 1-hour course that our students would enroll in. We no longer need a 1-hour course. Our curriculum is pretty well set, but we do want to continue to have the public health grand rounds as a resource for the state, an opportunity for continuing education and kind of emerging topics and information that folks might need, and that opportunity to cross from what's going on in practice and what's going on in research and vice versa, make sure that those two worlds are connected as much as possible. One thing that I think is a positive of how we're doing the public health grand rounds these days is that because we're not tied to a class, we're nimble, hopefully, in terms of if there's an emerging topic, if there's something going on in one of the counties that needs to be discussed or brought to the forefront, we're able to hopefully put that together pretty quickly for all of you. We broadcast the grand rounds via a webinar setup, and so again, any kind of time of the day, we try to avoid conflict with classes just to try to get as many students engaged as possible, but otherwise we're really flexible on days and times and so forth. Also could potentially put together a series around a particular topic if that was what was appropriate at the time. So definitely want to hear from folks across the state on your interest for public health grand rounds. There is a place on the KUMPH website where you can go and submit ideas, or if you particularly have an idea and could be a speaker for the grand rounds, please submit that way, or many of you have my email direct address, so please be in touch either way, and we'd love to organize that grand rounds opportunity, and particularly want to hear from the state in terms of whether there's something in particular you'd like to hear. We want to know that rather than us just kind of scrambling to come up with things that may not always be the best topic for you all who are in practice from day to day. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Okay, I turn my mic. Yep, you can hear me. All right, here we go. So my name is Nick Baldetti. I'm the director of the Reno County Health Department in Hutchinson, Kansas. I'm also the appointed health officer. And obviously my role in workforce development is I lead a local public health department. I've also been actively involved in the Public Health Workforce Development. I don't know. It's a really long acronym. Yeah, but I've been involved in that one since 2013. You'd think 2013 I should be able to rattle that off, but I've always had an interest just because, for the very sake of the quality of services that we administer at the Reno County Health Department, as well as the current staff that we employ, as well as future staff that we hopefully would recruit to Reno County and in Hutchinson. So when I first got involved, I'm going to be a little bit more of a storyteller here, but I have a couple of things that I think are really pertinent. When I first got involved and focused on workforce development as assistant director, we were talking about statewide workforce assessments, and then per accreditation doing a workforce assessment for our department. And you saw a report for the public health wins and specific skill gaps and then competencies around the core competencies and how could we bolster that. And I went in front of my staff and I'm like, yeah, we really need to learn how to do budget sheets, and we really need to get good on the core functions of public health. And it fell flat on its face. And through a couple of years of really trying that, and reflecting on the process, I really realized that we weren't at a point organizationally to jump right into that tactical work, and we really needed to step back. And for anybody that's embarked upon public health accreditation, I mean, technically we didn't have a true in-action strategic plan for our organization. So we really stripped it back all the way to the beginning, as simple as, hey, what do we do? What do we believe that we're doing on a day-to-day basis? And so we established a vision statement for the Reno County Health Department. That's that we believe every Reno County resident is going to live long and healthy lives, right? And the values that we expect to embody in fulfilling that mission is that we're accountable, we serve with compassion, we empower the individuals, we serve with integrity, and we're all a team. There's teamwork in that role. And once we began to lay that foundation and synergize all of our work around that common vision and those values, then we were able to have a better conversation about, okay, how can we better raise the level of services in terms of how we administer them as a public health department. And again, this, I'm going over a lot of challenges in this process, but one of the things we realized is that one of our core values is empowerment, but we weren't necessarily empowering our team towards administering those services. And so we sought out some grant funding, and our local Hutchinson Community Foundation was nice enough to fund a grant proposal for specific leadership training for the entirety of the Reno County Health Department. That's all 52 people that we employ. And we partnered with the Kansas Leadership Center in Wichita, and we didn't go to them, they came to us. And we sat down with them and we developed a leadership program specifically tailored after very specific interviews with staff and leaders on the staff about what our gaps were and why we weren't communicating effectively between each other and what was maybe holding us back. And that was a six-month process with representatives of KLC, really creating this kind of leadership capacity for staff to feel empowered to not only do their day-to-day roles, but then maybe break outside of the standard boxes that they had thought were their roles and ask questions and challenge norms and feel okay with uncertainty and potentially failing and experimenting and that being okay. And that was a really fun process to go through, in that we are getting out of, and this is recent if you haven't caught on already, but it's been a really fun process because staff are beginning to not only name challenges in the department, but they're also formulating their own teams without any administrative involvement or oversight or even permission to try and seek answers and solutions to these challenges internally, and creating a grassroots culture of addressing issues and problems. And it's not like everything's gravy by any means, but the fact that work is starting to happen at the health department is really encouraging, and that if we can capture that and transpose that to broader issues in our community in terms of service delivery and our involvement in our community, that we can truly help Reno County residents live long and healthy lives. The other story, I'm going for a twofer here, Shirley, so I hope that's okay. The other is, in my spare time, I help teach for KU, and I was teaching a public health administration class in the MPH program. And let's see, the last year and a half, it seems like an eternity, but we've had a pretty tumultuous wind farm energy project in Reno County. And the public health department, you know, I look back and laugh, but I definitely wasn't, yeah, Sonia knows, Sedgwick County's dealing with it too. But anyway, through that process, the health department was asked to do a comprehensive evaluation of health impacts around wind turbine and wind turbine placement around populated areas. I won't go into all of that, but simply put, bringing back the MPH class that was teaching, bringing that real world scenario into the classroom and talking to the class and the students about advocacy efforts and what the potential questions around policymakers and decision makers are asking of you as a public health professional, and how you have to frame those answers. And quite frankly, I think sometimes we as public health tend to wade in the neutral, and sometimes we just simply have to take a position, and we have to draw the line in the sand sometimes. And the more we do that, you know, we won't always be everybody's friend, but at least people will know what we represent. We got a lot of, I got a lot of good feedback from the MPH students, but it was really encouraging to know that these are potentially the future professionals in the public health system in the state of Kansas and elsewhere, but hopefully in the state of Kansas, that are learning the art of advocacy in terms of, I mean, we really, as a public health system, we need to bolster that advocacy presence at multiple levels, local, regional, and at the state level. So, and nationally too, let's not forget that. So anyway, that's what I got. Brandon, you're up.
Am I on? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. So my name is Brandon Skidmore. I'm a senior program officer with the Sunflower Foundation. We're a statewide funder. I've been at Sunflower Foundation for about 3.5 years, and prior to that, I spent 13 years at KDHE, and then prior to that, about 4 years in consulting for public health. In my time at KDHE, I think I bring a lot of that with me to my work at Sunflower, and not only kind of from the perspective of what I liked about working with program officers and what I hated about working with program officers, and trying to be more of the former and not the latter. But also, I think, just bringing the challenges of what it was like to kind of organize around issues of capacity and workforce. At the time I spent at KDHE, I spent my whole time in one unit, and left there as the director of that unit, and trying to organize a $15 million budget around 70 full-time staff. And you go through an elaborate strategic planning process like most organizations do, and you have your goals and your strategies and everything set out. And then the reality of the 40 scopes of work that you have from all of your funding sources come into play. And sometimes those scopes of work don't necessarily equal your strategic plan. And your strategic plan is a very public health focused plan, but your scope of work is a reality of what you can staff and pay for. And so there's always this challenge of how you blend those and how you move forward the core tenets of public health while doing work that's being paid for. And I think that that's a strategy or an issue that most public health departments are dealing with as well. And so I was really excited when I came to the Sunflower Foundation, because we're having those conversations. We're trying to figure out how you develop a more coordinated and synergistic investment strategy. And that's hard to do when your mission is to fund health across Kansas, because there are 1,000,001 great ideas at any given day. And how do you take the little pot of money that you have to invest and do it in a way that your board feels like is strategic and is catalytic and is moving you to root causes and systems solutions? And those are the things that we think about, and workforce plays into that. But I think it's also a challenge of how do you tease out workforce from innovative, catalytic to workforce that's core government. And then that's where foundations start to shy away from things that are core government in terms of, well, this is the responsibility or what a local or state government should be funding, therefore we're not going to do it. So I think we're always trying to, straddle that line of funding that is core general operating support, which is the oil for your engine. It's not necessarily the shiny paint job, to the thing that is the shiny paint job, the shiny thing that foundations like, quite frankly. But we also recognize that you got to have the system in place in order to make the shiny things run. And I think those are the conversations that we're always trying to have and that local partners inform us of and educate us on. And I think that we've made some strides and we have a lot of work to do moving ahead, but I think I'm excited about some of the investments. We have an investment in KPHA around Public Health 3.0. We have an investment with the Association of Community Mental Health Centers of Kansas looking at system solutions, and their whole grant is around engaging state member associations on how you collectively work around common issues. And I think that we heard a lot of things here today that come up in our conversations all the time that I will take back to the conversations that we're continuing to have, and those are things like build systems, not silos. Some of the questions that we have surfaced here, which is there's always the capacity and systems needs of a particular sector like public health, but what is the capacity of your system that you operate in locally? So beyond just public health. Knowing that medium-sized and large-sized public health departments will probably be able to get closer to the ultimate goal than small health departments will. And then how do you address those needs of small health departments? And is their capacity always going to be within their health department, or is some of their capacity going to come from their system? And how do you catalyze that and make that something that all the players are willing to invest in and work towards? So those are some of the things that I think we're thinking about from a funding perspective as workforce fits into that, but also trying to think about some of the systems players. And been having a lot of conversations with Dennis at CALD and what that looks like to help health departments get to the point where, which is kind of from the story I started from, which is I think a lot of times funding enables you to do some really great things early on, but the intention is always that as funding goes on, you're building capacity locally to take on that work, to take the ownership of that work and continue it. And I think a lot of times what we find is the same thing that most system partners find is the funding leaves and we're all at this threshold. And instead of looking out into this lush green land that we're going to move into, it's this barren desert because the ground hasn't been tilled, the soil hasn't been prepared. And to me, that's the goal and the job of organizations like KPHA and CALD to be helping local health departments be tilling that soil to where when that funding ends, there are those conversations. Local commissioners are educated about the need for additional funding, that health departments are going to work in a space that is beyond what's reimbursed, and recognizing that there's probably going to be some subsidy there to actually do the full spectrum of what public health should be doing. So I think from a funder's perspective, we're trying to catalyze and seed some of that work, but we also know that we also have to be funding some other things that help some of the long-term sustainability be there, given the fact that we have issues around property tax caps locally that are strapping health departments from, leveraging any more resources. We have small populations where the tax base is small to begin with. And we have health departments that are small, and the reality is a lot of commissioners think that a good health department is one that's self-sustainable. And I think that that's some education that we have to do as a system where there's a lot beyond what is reimbursed right now that public health should be doing. And I think funders have an opportunity and a responsibility to be working in that space, and workforce is definitely one of them.
So what questions do you have for the first group? So Tanya, I guess one thing never, frankly, even occurred to me, and I've talked to you many, many times about grand rounds. So a department, a group of departments, a sector of the state could come to you and say, we're interested in exploring XYZ. Would you work with us to put together a grand rounds and share that? Okay.
Yes, absolutely, because it may not even be the faculty within our university who can provide some of that support. We can reach out to the other universities across the state. There may be other partners in other sectors that may be able to help address the issue as well. But we're certainly a starting point. If someone has an idea or a need, we're happy to explore that.
I wonder if I could ask Nick, and I didn't prepare you for this, but I know you can just think great on your feet, so it won't be a problem. But I wonder, you are one of the individuals in the room that come from one of the mid-sized or departments that serve rural populations. And I'm wondering from your perspective, you're rural, but you have additional capacity beyond some of the very, very small departments. And I'm wondering what ways in which have you been called upon by your peers, or how do you envision you might in the future support or assist them in doing their work? Sort of what Brandon was framing as that work that happens from outside.
Yeah. That's a really good question, and in some circles can be really pervasive question. There's no doubt that in our smaller rural counties that they're strapped for resources, whether that resource is monetary, whether it's staffing time, or it could even be social capital in terms of their relationship with other organizations within their community, and or even their Board of County Commissioners and their Board of Health. You just tell me if I'm going where you want me to go.
Oh, yeah.
For Reno County, we are surrounded by some of those relatively smaller rural communities. Additionally, Reno County is the second largest county in the state of Kansas. Our county seat is Hutchinson, which has a population of just under 43,000, and our total county population is just over 63,000. But aside from Hutchinson, we have 14 municipalities that are recognized, and we have extreme frontier rural, and the western side of our county in Hutchinson is located on the right, or on the right, the east part. I'm a picture guy, so I see it in my mind. But anyway, some of those rural counties that share our boundaries have actually communicated and entered into cross-jurisdictional sharing agreements with us for whether it be WIC dietetic services or environmental health sanitation services, because it's just simply capacity that they aren't able to furnish themselves. And so if I'm going where you want me to go, I think probably in terms of sustainability for a public health system, to continue to work with the amount of resources, the more with less mentality that we always seem to be operating under, is we need to have a real candid conversation about cross-jurisdictional sharing agreements. I know people think that that's just a gateway drug to regionalizing public health. I don't think it's that drastic, but we also can't turn a blind eye not thinking that having 98 health departments in a state with 102 counties is the most fiscally responsible way to administer services. So. Is that where you wanted to go?
That's exactly. You knew.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think it's a good conversation, I think, to begin to have, or we've begun it, but I think to think more, especially thinking about workforce. Workforce seems to be one potential kind of easier area of that, perhaps to begin with, to start navigating, to build on.
Yeah, so I think, the CGS conversation doesn't have to be solely specified around programmatic pieces. It can also be about shared resources in terms of individuals. One of the conversations we're having is I was able to hire a full-time epidemiologist on at Reno County. Let's see, he's been there a year and a half now. And immediately once I hired him, I had partnering counties asking, hey, can you take our disease investigation on for us? And while he's not ramped up to do that yet, I think it's a very real conversation, and it's also happening in other circles, such as a proposed model, a regional like informatician for public health work that we could explore as a system around regionalizing certain workforce strengths that maybe, they might be housed at one place, but their jurisdiction is, and what they do, such as disease investigation, can span multiple jurisdictions, but that obviously brings into question relationships not only at the health department level, but also at the commission level to ensure those contractual obligations across jurisdictions. So.
I think you've hit on a potential public health grand rounds for us. I think, too, we don't have to always have a really kind of formal academic presentation for grand rounds, but an opportunity to share the stories of how you got from point A to point B. Yeah. Just to share those stories and what were the successes, what were the things that were kind of, hung you up that you weren't expecting, different ideas that you weren't expecting to come from it. So I think that that's another way we could use the grand rounds going forward.
And to add to Nick's comments, I think, which are great, I think we always tend to look at it from the negative aspect as opposed to looking at autonomy through shared capacity. So how does shared capacity allow us to maintain our own existence and our own identity without just having to totally go away into some regionalized system? But how do we share those resources and that capacity to prop that up in a way to where communities and counties still have their identity through public health, but public health is ensured that it is delivering on all the aspects of what it should be delivering on to be a public health department. And I think that those are things that funding can help. Those are catalytic systems solution issues that are fundable in a lot of different areas. The key is trying to figure out how you transition them into a sustainable funding mechanism, and I think that's where the local players doing the work come in, because Nick and his counterparts know that work the best.
Well, just to tack onto that, I agree that I think funding has a catalytic role in that, but it's also the advocacy at the statewide level through like our Kansas Association of Local Health Departments, but also as individual health departments or groups of health departments, in that we need to advocate at the state level. I mean, there's something to be said when the state formula funding hasn't been touched since 1992. I don't know about you, but there's been a number of massive national things that have happened, let alone that I don't pay the same price for gas that I did in 1992. But the fact that public health funding at the statewide level has not increased since 1992 tells you that we have some work to do in terms of advocating on behalf of public health services and the work that we do day in and day out in raising public health to the same let's just call it importance as you always hear about the triangle in terms of public works, public safety, and public health. Well, many times I don't think your traditional commissioner will even be able to give you two of the three. It's usually public works and roads. I mean, I know that's the same old treadmill, but the fact is they won't catch on unless we're in front of them telling them. I think the old adage is you tell them and ask for it 17 times before it starts to sink in. So I'm big on advocacy, if you can't tell.
Anyone else have a question or a comment for this group? Anyone have anything that they want to share to build on what's been said already? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Group A.
Good afternoon. I'm Vicki Colley-Akers. I'm an associate professor in the Population Health Department at KU Med Center. And I'm also the liaison for the academic health department that we have with Lawrence Douglas County Health Department and share with KU Lawrence. I'm really excited to talk about our work with the academic health department and the extent that it contributes to workforce development. Our academic health department has had 3 objectives since its inception in 2013. The first is to drive policy, system, and environmental change that enhances the health of Douglas County residents. The second is to contribute to the evidence about what works in public health. And then the third is to build the capacity of the existing and future workforce. It might be easier to start with the future workforce. We have done that through student placement at Lawrence Douglas County. We currently have 2 MPH students that are enrolled in the MPH program that Tanya told you about. And there are also a number of undergraduate students that come through the University of Kansas Lawrence, particularly the Applied Behavioral Science Department. Our approach to the workforce development of the existing workforce really happens through both informal and formal opportunities. And I'll start by kind of talking about the informal opportunities. I think in that way, it really functions by us working in accompaniment with the local health department, so university colleagues working alongside health department staff to promote common goals. I have a few examples that I'll highlight. The first is our city commission asked for a position paper on tobacco 21. And although they largely ignore our position paper, we did do that position paper. So in that instance, I wrote the first position paper that was viewed and edited. It served as a template. And now health department staff who were recently asked to weigh in on fees for recreation center use are writing those position papers on their own and distributing it. And I think that serves as an example of capacity that was built, particularly around health equity impact assessments. We also worked alongside them to develop their equity committee work, which we'll be talking about more at KPHA tomorrow, so hopefully stay tuned. But that really started out by KU and KU Med Center staff doing the facilitation and design of the work, developing learning opportunities, and then over time handing that off to health department staff for the facilitation and work. And then lastly, I'll just note that the community health assessment and community health plan element of their accreditation work, as well as just overall public health practice, I think serves as another good example of working informally to develop staff capacity. During that first community health assessment process that happened in 2011, KU staff largely did the heavy lifting of that work, including writing the reports and facilitating all the planning sessions. In this most recent iteration that really took place in 2017 and 2018, that was more of a shared load. And although I don't like to think of working myself out of a job, I think that'll happen for the next one, where largely the roles will very much flip, where their health department staff will lead and do most of the work, but it's also an exciting example of capacity that was developed. The other side of our workforce development efforts are more formal, where we've sought out specific learning opportunities. We started by having staff complete coursework, and we supported financially their completion of coursework through the Building Healthy Communities class that happens at KU Lawrence. We developed workshops and trainings around things like health equity impact assessments and community engagement. We tried a journal club, and although I found that endlessly fascinating, I'm not sure that it was our best example of a success, if you will. However, one thing that has endured beyond our lunch and learn bags is instances where there's emerging research. They reach out to us to ask for more information about that, and can we help connect them to the actual journal article, which we know that a lot of our academic or our practice partners don't have access to. Can we talk about this? So, for example, when Karen DeSalvo's more recent article about funding came out, that went in 100 different directions to our practice partners as well as our academic partners, which is exciting. And I'll close by just highlighting something that is emerging and that we're really excited about. Last week, we started an 8-month series of trainings with all of the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department staff, undertaking a Chief Health Strategist 101 training that'll unfold between now and next May, I believe. Stacy will tell you about it more, I'm sure. But our goal with that is to really demystify Public Health 3.0. So Public Health 3.0 is something that everybody is talking about at a very surface level. But what we're really hoping is that we get below that surface level, and that across all parts of the health department, people are comfortable talking about Public Health 3.0, are comfortable explaining how it fits with their position and how they're going to contribute to that in our health department and jurisdiction. So as well as we're going to explore population level strategies, and then lastly, really engage in applications so that we're not just talking about what is policy development, but how are you doing policy development? How are you contributing to that in your role? So we're really excited to do it with the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department, and we got news last week that we'll be able to do that with 6 additional local health departments in Kansas. So look forward to talking to some of you about that.
All right, thanks. Setting a little midpoint timer for myself. All right, good afternoon. So my name is Sonia Armbruster, and I know most of you in the room. My roles as it relates to workforce development are 2 or 3-fold. First of all, I work full-time at Wichita State University teaching our future undergraduates public health. And I also work with the Public Health Foundation, delivering technical assistance and training to health departments in all shape and size, from Blackhawk County, I went there once, so that's cool, Erin. Actually, I went there twice, to state and territorial and tribal health departments. So I've seen a lot of different models for that, which is fun, and see how different people do their workforce development work, which has been very informative to my own thinking. And then last but not least, I also get to work with Lori Walkner and the team and Melissa and all with the Midwestern Public Health Training Center, and I want to make sure I mention that. So when Shirley asked if I would say something about workforce development and what I'm thinking about, that was pretty broad, and it gave me a chance to think about 3 things that I want to mention. One is curiosity, a second is connectedness, and the third is continuousness. So first of all, about curiosity. I am continuously curious about what does the workforce need, what do they want, and how can we deliver it in a way that's going to meet them where they are. So some people really want an online course, and some people really just need to be in person. And how do we do meaningful, transformative training that keeps people in their jobs and keeps people informed about how to do the best possible work? And I think it takes kinds of big investments like an 8-month Public Health 3.0 Chief Health Strategist kind of a course. I mean, I think those intensive learning things matter. So being curious about what that means. And I think it has to happen at the agency level, and I think it has to happen at the state plan level. The second one is also a 3-part thing on connectedness. I really believe in the power of connectedness, and for me that means things like invitations. So my entry into public health was accidental, as many of the colleagues that I know have had. I was invited to come and work on a summer research project. That invitation turned into a student project that I presented at KPHA my first year in 2001. I've been here every year since. That opportunity turned into a scholarship to go to the APHA and learn there. And I'm just saying that it's those invitations where we bring people along, that each one reach one kind of a thing, I think really matters. And I think those relationships don't happen by accident, they happen on purpose, and we have to create those opportunities to pull people up and along. And one way that I saw that done in a specific workforce development way was I did some work with some health departments in Colorado with their training center with Sarah and the team, and they were developing workforce development plans for their agencies. So 3 health departments came together so that they could get trained about how to do that. at the same time, and they each brought an intern with them so that the intern could do most of the work on the workforce development plan, but the staff would be trained and understand why they were doing it. And so it was this big collaboration to bring people along and connect new people to the overarching work, and I just think we need more of that kind of stuff. Related to our Midwestern Public Health Training Center, I just want to mention as it relates to connectedness, one of the things that I think we struggle with is systems thinking. It's one of those supporting strategic thinking pieces that's in that de Beaumont report that was mentioned earlier. And one of the things that I think we struggle with is so many of us do our job and we put on our blinders and do our job, and we don't see necessarily how it connects with what everybody else is doing within our agency or within our mission or within the county or the state, et cetera. So if we can create conditions where people better understand their system and how they fit in it, I think that matters. We're getting ready to launch a course on Train that will support that sort of thing, connecting accreditation and QI and leadership and systems thinking together. And that's work that I've worked on with Jessica and some others. So that's going to be a course coming out. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention that we also have this very cool new podcast out from the Midwestern Public Health Training Center that's intended to be continuous workforce development around a variety of topics that are related to public health and the larger system. And the first few on that are related to mental health and public health. And the name of that podcast is Share Public Health, and you can find it anywhere you can find podcasts. And I encourage you to subscribe. I subscribed. It's pretty awesome. The first one has a couple of Kansans on there, Dr. Amy Chesser and Dr. Suzanne Hawley. So many of you know those folks. So, and the next one I've already listened to also, and there's a third one out. So please listen to them. The last thing I wanted to say on my 3 C's was continuous capacity building. So often in this work, we do, hey, we did a training for our staff, and wasn't that nice? And we want to step back and admire it and look at it and go, look, we trained everybody up, and now they're trained, and so we can move on. And it's just not like that. It's just not like that. I started studying leadership when I was an undergrad, and that was a long time ago. I was laughing when he was talking about the silver hair in the audience earlier. So I spent a week at the Kansas Leadership Center this summer because you just have to keep learning. And we all do, and we can't just go one and done on any kind of training development. It's got to be continuous. So my parting thought about that is, I don't know what you guys were doing last night, but I unloaded and loaded the dishwasher and I put away my laundry. And laundry and dishes show up all the time. They are continuous, and so is our need to continue developing the workforce.
All right. Well, I won't be talking about dishes because I did them last week and I mostly use paper plates because I'm so cheap. Oh, come on. I'm helping. I recycled them. My name is Dennis Kriesel. I'm the Executive Director for the Kansas Association of Local Health Departments, commonly referred to as CALD. I am also a mere MPA. I started with the Kansas Association of Counties, and I did actually start in public health. I was grant funded to be a public health fellow back before MPHs were common. Or at least in Kansas. And so it was like, well, I knew energy policy, so how different could it be? Well, it was a lot different, but in terms of what CALD does is broadly we advocate on behalf of and represent local health departments in Kansas. Currently 94 of the 100 are active members in the association. This takes the form in a lot of various ways, but focusing on workforce development, obviously we play a role in training. We try and listen to our membership and liaise with KDHE to find out where are those gaps, how can we help, and if that help sometimes is participating in workshops or with other groups to coordinate and get a say in what those sort of trainings will be. In terms of what we ourselves provide, we have a mid-year meeting every year where it's highly targeted towards local health department administrators specifically, though a lot of the information is probably broadly relevant to upper-level staff to get information out through that. We also work with other organizations like the Kansas Association of Counties, which was my predecessor organization. But because virtually all local health departments are run by a local board of health that consists of the county commission, you need to have them educated as well because they are the bosses overseeing these health departments. And as Nick noted when he was on this panel, they don't know nothing about public health. There are a few diamonds in the rough, And you can home grow some public health champions, and that's actually something sort of separate from workforce development I would encourage you to try and do if you are a local official, is really do try and at least get one of them and make them understand. And then you have a champion, you have an ally, and that comes in handy when it comes to funding time. So it does pay dividends. But in terms of the Kansas Association of Counties, they have a new commissioner orientation that they do every other year. Public Health has a seat at that table. We have the same seat that Public Works and Public Safety has. It's not a big seat. We're talking like 90 minutes every other year. But it's something where they get to be indoctrinated with what is public health and why and how it applies to the job they just took on. Because most of them ran because they wanted to fill some potholes. They didn't know that there was quarantine power and that they had to worry about disease outbreaks, or much less what Public Health 3.0 is. In terms of the future and where I kind of think on the training front it's going, I mean, some of the more practical things are we're working with Christie Kane's group about having an orientation for local health administrators. CALD puts out every year a revised manual that's on our website, available to anyone, to help them understand what their roles and responsibilities are as a local health department administrator. And we have it revised with Wichita State University every year. That's about a 70-page document. So we're talking about doing about a 6-hour training in 2020 in conjunction with the Governor's Public Health Conference. And I'm sure Christy enjoyed my After Hours Friday email with the attached draft of how I would do those 6 hours as a training guide. But so that's something that we're looking at in the future, in addition to the feedback that we get for how we're going to fill out our mid-year meeting and the other resources we try and do to help the workforce out, namely our billing manual that we provide for billers for Medicaid payment collection and such, so you don't have to go through the hundreds of pages that are not relevant to public health when you turn to the MCOs. Separate from training is the advocacy angle, and Nick also talked about that, so I'll just add some high notes to it as well. An organization like CALD's is an advocacy organization. We're a professional association, we're 509A2, but we do have the ability to advocate, and I also specifically mean that subset of advocacy called lobbying. And lobbying is something that public health, in my view, needs to get better at. You need to start doing it if you want to ever get your way. So Nick mentioned state formula funding and how long ago that wasn't revised. We're still in the process of coming up with our organization's legislative platform. However, based off the preliminary discussions, I think we will be making an ask. It will be a large ask. We can do things like this related to workforce development. That funding alone can be related to workforce development because it provides a resource to achieve things. Vicki mentioned the DeSalvo article. We know that if we want to do foundational public health services, Public Health 3.0, encouraging chief health strategists, accreditation, the FAB standard, we cannot do that with the resources that are in this state and are provided to public health right now. But who's going to ask for it if not you? Well, I mean, I guess I can ask for it, and I probably will. But we as a group, public health needs to start defending itself and going forth and actually saying, we're important and we need these things. We know what we want to do. We have all the guides already, but we have to start selling it to the legislature. And that 17 times thing, I hope it doesn't take that long, because that's 17 years in legislative sessions. But I remember when 911 finally got a tax on cell phones so that we could trace people to find when they had car accidents and locate them. That was a 10-year battle, 10 years in Kansas to get that law. It was introduced every single one of those years, but it worked. And it has stuck around since then, and it has gained funding and has become more robust. We need to become more robust, and that means we need to start advocating for public health with our state legislators in particular. All right.
Okay, so hi, my name is Stacey Rollins. I am the HR and Planning Coordinator at the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department that Vicki was talking about, and I come from a very different perspective of the three of them. I have been with the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department for about 2 years now. I started as an intern, finishing up my bachelor's degree in public health, so I'm very new into public health, and so I took Shirley's kind of prompt of what to write about kind of literally. She wanted us to, she asked me to highlight a workforce development or education opportunity that we had at the health department. And so I want to talk something about that impacted me in my work, especially with me being so new to public health, straight out of college. So it refers back to our strategic plan. We have a goal to build an infrastructure that supports workforce development and effective systems for improvement. And one of those was to build our leadership program. So we actually started to build a team, and we started going through KLC training. So in 2018, we sent the first 2 members of our staff to the KLC Teach Leadership Intensive, which is that 50-hour course that includes training, practice, observation, and assessment. And so those first 2 received that in-class training in March of 2018. And they had to shadow some master teachers, and then they had to develop and put on their own sessions teaching KLC principles, and for a total of 6 teaching hours. So they came back to the health department and started a Leadership 101 course for staff and community partners who wanted to participate. With that, we actually had it wasn't a required thing for our staff. It was just highly encouraged, and we did shape it around our staff's, our clinic work time, so that it was at a good time where anybody could attend that wanted to attend. And they had the same session that they offered 3 different times so that a wider variety of people could do it. And that was very much an introduction into KLC, just very brief. Then in January of this year, the opportunity was open to all staff of who else would like to be trained in this, who else would like to become a teacher of KLC. And we actually had 3 staff members, including myself, sign up for that. And so we went in March again to that in-class training, and this was the second time KLC was offering this. And we went along with our director of behavioral health projects, our title, who works with Douglas County, but is actually housed in our office space. The 4 of us went down together. So we were actually able to, after all that in-class training and through webinars, we actually developed a 3-part pilot program for our staff of how they can start using KLC. And we actually took a subset of our staff. We used the same staff members through all 3 sessions so that we could build on it, because we wanted to see how we could impact something like this into our whole health department, and we could tailor it to our various groups so that they could work through understanding adaptive challenges, going through the observation, interpretation, and intervention cycle, figuring out the gap process, if you know those KLC terminologies. And so we've built up this team of 5 teachers now who are in-house, and those teachers, we all span across informatics, community health, and our clinic services, so it wasn't just held in one program area. And so we were really, and we've kind of exemplified that leadership is an activity, not a position in our health department, because when all of us went through this training, none of us were in a position of authority, and now only one person is. And so we are trying to show that to our staff, that anybody can be a leader here. So this is where it gets personal to me now of this opportunity. At the beginning of this year, my job was in transition, and I was getting on new responsibilities that I wasn't really sure how to do, being so new. I was a little over a year out of college, and now doing responsibilities where I had to engage our upper level management, including my supervisor and the 2 people who signed my check, and start to give them deadlines and critique their work. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work out. When I first got that brought on me, but as I went through KLC, I was actually able to see, like, oh wait, hold on, this adaptive challenge, like I can work through the process and So not only was I learning how to come back and teach our staff how to be leaders, I actually got to apply it into my work and help in that transition process. And again, currently, as I just transitioned into a new position that we have at the health department just at the beginning of this month. So it's been a lot of changing. But through that, it was also very eye-opening to me to be invested in that way from the health department. As such a new employee, they were willing to give up that week of work and all this extra time they've had to put towards that to not only strengthen me as an employee, but so I can help elevate and strengthen those around me. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I'm grateful that I'm in public health where I have that support from others who want to keep growing and improving.
My name is Kira King. I am with the Johnson County Department of Health and Environment, and I am here actually with our department's Workforce Development Committee co-chair, Megan Sadler, who's trying to get out of this, but she won't. Let me first state, if you remember back to Aldana's conversation, I am her former staff that she speaks of that can attest to her dedication to developing the workforce and kind of new learning opportunities. So I have been with the health department for about 3.5, almost 4 years. If you count my internship as well, I interned with the department, first with childcare licensing with Aldana's division, and then I was offered a position as a surveyor in her division, which is where I was for about 3.5 years. So like a couple of you, I am new to this role. My title is actually Workforce Development Coordinator. So I'm in this interesting position where I think not many other departments have the ability to kind of fund a role specifically to workforce development. Our department also is not entirely sure what this position looks like, should look like, and what it can do. Unique to our department is really my background. So like I said, I came from childcare licensing, so my undergrad is in education. And then I got my master's in business administration with an HR focus. My committee chair, Megan, is her education is in budget and finance. She's also our department's division director for business operations. So we are both not public healthers who are kind of leading this workforce development train. Our challenges are really, they're so broad. So it's really interesting to kind of hear about everything that everybody is going through and the questions that you have, primarily because we have a population of almost 600,000 people. Our department is about 140-ish, spanned over 7 divisions. So for her and I to be able to really say we know everything about each division and the work that they do, it is really challenging, and it really challenges us to find new ways to work with the divisions to kind of get those subject matter experts within our department at the table. So Megan, I'm not sure, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how that looks in our department with our committee? Teamwork. Swap, tag team. This is where you get to see the pass.
This is where we pass off. Okay. So I think, so Kira took on this role of Workforce Development Coordinator, I don't know, earlier this spring, I guess. And so she's definitely taking a different approach to her committee that she's sort of charged with chairing. And then I was selected as the co-chair. And really we're working on, a lot of our committees in the department seem to be made up of people who maybe had some sort of interest in the type of work that's going on the committee, but maybe weren't well suited for it. And so we're taking a more, deliberate approach to who is on the Workforce Development Committee and what their assignments are going to be. So in JCDHE, we all go through this sort of assessment when you start on with a department, and it's called Strengths Finder, and it's put on by our mental health department, but we all sort of work together to go through that training. And so that really identifies what your strengths are as an employee and sort of what your preferences are and what your strong suit is going to be. And so when we were getting this committee together, sort of looking through where every committee member's strengths were, what were their top 5, and then what type of work are they going to be best suited for based on those strengths. So Kira, remind me, we've got logistics team, we've got recruiting, retention, learning and development. Yes, that's important. Yeah. And so we really looked at based on their strengths identified in these strengths finder activities, what are they going to be best suited for? And we know that the more the schmoozers, the more sociable types are going to be more better suited towards retention and recruitment and then things like that. So that's something different that we're doing, different than any of our other committees in the department, and we're both very new at it. And so we're trying it and see what happens, and maybe we'll let you know next year. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Christie Kane. I am the director of the local public health program and the accreditation coordinator at Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And I think one reason why I'm up here and wanted to talk about workforce development is at KDHE, the local public health program really is responsible for a lot of the workforce development opportunities that are available for local health departments, at least that are funded by KDHE. And so a couple of those are Governor's Public Health Conference and Kansas Train, which Train was mentioned earlier. I think the 30th state signed up to be on Kansas Train. Kansas Train is one of the Uber users of Train per capita. We have, I think it's second most users in the country. So it's definitely, I think because of the geography of Kansas, it's definitely something that is well suited for Kansans as far as getting real-time workforce development out there. And our instructional designer was here this morning, but she's not here, otherwise I would pick on her like Megan got called up. But she's always telling me about micro-learnings, and she's talking about the short attention spans people have. And so she's always looking for ideas like, hey, let's do a micro-learning on that. And so you can do really short segments, and we have the capacity to do that. So if anyone has any ideas of either longer trainings or micro learnings, kind of like when Tanya was talking about grand rounds, we're always looking for topics. And so if you have a need, then we would definitely be amenable to creating some courses. We also do the public health workforce assessment in partnership with a lot of different organizations. And so that will be coming up next year as well, along with PH Wins. That data is really helpful in looking at what the gaps are in the system and where we might want to focus efforts. I know that the gaps in PH Wins, they were similar to the workforce assessment. Financial management was definitely a huge one, so something that we could definitely do something about. I also wanted to mention the project that we're working on with DeBoma, the recruitment and retention project. So as was mentioned this morning, 4 of us went to Washington, D.C. to have training in appreciative inquiry. And we're just really excited to be part of the 18-month project. And we're hoping to share that information with the local health departments that we receive. We're also hoping, I just remember in writing the needs assessment, how dire our situation sounded at the state health department. I don't know if that's why we got chosen or not, Chris. But it was like, well, state employees hadn't had raises in 10 years. And like the last administration was difficult for state employees in general. And we had a huge amount of turnover in a short period of time. And it's difficult to recruit people when they see negative press about the state and being a state employee. And so, and then when our base pay rates are a lot lower than the national average. So definitely some challenges to overcome. And so that is what we're hoping to do with the project, is really learn some specific strategies using appreciative inquiry and other things that we learn along the way. And then the last thing I wanted to share is just one of the things that we looked at in PH Wins and the De Beaumont project is using creativity and innovation in our work in workforce development. And we just have something cool that I'm really excited about coming up that is workforce development, and then it's also, just kind of a different take. And so we had been struggling for a few years hearing local health departments saying that they had prioritized behavioral health as part of their assessment process, but didn't know what to do next. And we looked, this was the first year that we actually collected the CHIP priorities from the local health departments and figured out that 50 health departments had prioritized behavioral health. And they're like, well, we don't know what to do next. Many of them did, but some of them, we heard from a lot of them that they didn't know what to do next. And so we had some extra funding that had to be spent by September 30th. So we scheduled an event, which many of you are registered for September 30th, which is Behavioral Health Community Planning Day. And we just started brainstorming with a group of people and came up with a really cool agenda that I'm really excited about. And so stay tuned, because we hope to be sharing that with the rest of the state. We're having it here in Topeka on September 30th. And so we'll see what comes of it and what tweaks need to be made. But I thought it was a really good opportunity to be innovative.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Viscous. I am with the Center for Public Health Initiatives at the Wichita State Community Engagement Institute. It's lots of words. First of all, I want to apologize if I can't seem to shake my chills, so I feel like my voice sounds shaky, but I just can't seem to get warm today. So if I sound a little funny, that's probably why. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with our organization and specifically our center, but we are fortunate enough to get to work with a lot of you in a lot of different capacities over the course of every single year. And I have, how many teammates do I have now? 8 teammates, I believe, that work. And what we focus on is helping to support strengthening and building the capacity of our public health system here in the state of Kansas. So, which really opens us up to a lot of doors for a lot of different things and working with a lot of different partners. And I love being last because essentially Sonia and Dennis both set me up just perfectly for the thing I wanted to talk about. So thank you both very much, making my job easier. So like I said, our team works to support our state in a variety of different ways. But I want to talk about one specific example just because I think it helps highlight some of the process that we engage in. Sonia talked about continuousness and that idea of continuously building your capacity, and whether you have been in the workforce for 4 months or 2 years or 20 years, that's a very important skill to have and to focus on and thinking about moving forward and how do I continue to build. That also applies for our individual organizations, our communities, our state. So when we think about how do we continue to build on and keep analyzing where we're at and where do we need to move the needle, that's something that I feel like we, in partnership with our other organizations around the state, really like to focus on and that we do well. And so Dennis's example that he brought up about the new director, the orientation that's hosted on the CALD website, I believe it was, and I'm going to look to a couple of you, 2013, 2014, when that partnership started, where there was an identified gap through that work that they do at CALD that said, hey, we maybe need a little something extra. There's some support, but maybe something else where we can have everything hosted in one spot would be great, because when you get in that new role as a new director, there's just a lot of different places to be looking, and everybody's telling you need to be doing all these different things. So our team, and this was before I was with the center, worked in partnership with CALD and I believe KDHE to kind of help get the manual itself together, and there was actually funding for one point in time for some paired mentoring. And so again, in that partnership, we were able to partner new directors with existing directors who wanted to be part of this mentorship program to get them some one-on-one support as they came across the many hurdles that I'm sure you come across as a new director, just to help support them in that role. And that to me kind of applies to that, helping with some of the retention piece of our workforce, because wow, is that not overwhelming to take on that new role, especially maybe you're moving from another community or having to let go of some of your old work, or in a lot of circumstances, you're keeping your old work and taking on a new director job until you find somebody else to take that other role. So that started, and over the years, as Dennis said, it gets updated annually through our partnership, and recently through just continued discussion and idea generation, we've been working with KDHE and called in what he was talking about, the in-person session that will happen as a pre-session at the Governor's Public Health Conference. So as of right now, we are in just the planning stages. Some of the next steps for that are to convene a design team, of which I know we've already had some folks from local health departments say that they're interested, and think about what that day would actually look like, because you could probably spend a week doing a new director orientation, but we're going to work on a 6-hour time frame. So continuing to work with our partners to figure out what are the needs of our new directors and public health leaders, and how do we work together to support them in that space. And as time goes on, we'll continue to assess, is this the most effective way? Is this still what our new directors might need? And we'll, like I said, continue to convene folks. And I think that process, when we think about our workforce needs, as others have highlighted, is something that everybody on my team is very proud to be part of, and just that continuous engagement and looking at, do we need to be moving the needle? Like, this worked great. Is great good enough, or do we need to take another step or make a course correction? Because we really like to do the things we know we do well, and sometimes that's not always the thing that's what we need. So I think that, like I said, that's just kind of one example, and I think I talked really fast, so I didn't use all my time, but yeah.
Good, because I can use it. No. I'm teasing. First of all, I want to say to Johnson County, I don't know what you all said, but my leadership team came back to Sedgwick County and said, oh my God, you have got to make sure you meet. So whatever you all are doing, you have to tell me about it. I have to make a note, and I will report it out. So thank you very much. And for you, baby, power surges will come. Personal summers will happen. You won't ever have to make that statement again. All right, I'm back. Okay, so I'm Pamela King Burns from Sedgwick County in Wichita, Kansas. We are the county seat for Sedgwick County, and I'm grateful to be here. I haven't heard it. I just knew I was going to hear what I wanted to share with you all today. I have a bachelor's in ethnic studies and a master's, an MPA, a master's in public administration. And I always tell people I came in backwards into public health. When I came into public health, Sonia was still there and working with the health department, and I believe you and Adrian hired me. I was very excited to get that job. Didn't have a clue about what public health was, but I somehow found out, well, I had a little bit of a clue, but I found out early on that workforce development and public health and all of that had to do with people, and it had to do with people living a quality life, and it had to do with people doing well in what they did, in whatever their work was or whatever their services were. And I started out in the Center for Health Equity. And the Center for Health Equity somehow caused alarm to the group of public health officials that we had. And one specifically said, well, if we have a Center for Health Equity, that means we have some inequities. That's not a good look. After that, we disappeared. right? And fortunately, I was pulled into the rest of the health department and we were disseminated, but they couldn't take what was already in us out, and we were disseminated throughout the public health workforce and the Sedgwick County Health Department. So I inherited the workforce development work. I am a workforce development coordinator, but my title is project manager. So part of the workforce development coordination is I am my team as well. I'm getting ideas. When I go back, they're going to rue the day that they sent me here to be trained. Everybody's going to help with this. But we, as I was ascending that hill of, when you begin to learn it, what is that called? When you climb and you're learning curve. As I am plateauing out, I am finding out some things that are working very well. Number one, I said, hey, let's put our applications for internships, because we needed public health workers, right? Raise your hand if you disagree. Good, you're listening. So we wanted to put those applications online, and we have an online application that people from across the nation have applied for these internship positions. And we also have our list of affiliation agreements that have been completed. They send us a resume, a writing example, that type thing, or a writing sample, because we invite them into our work. As a matter of fact, I didn't know I was going to say this, but Sonia had an intern who put together our preceptor's guide for our interns. And so while we're training future public health workers, we're also allowing our current staff to train in how to train the public health staff. And so all around, people are getting that exposure to training our staff. We reach out to partners. CEI, I have been there as part of the workforce development effort. I am allowed to go into the public and speak to people about unnatural causes. Is inequality making us sick? And I have come to CEI, I don't know if you were in that group, room full of people where we discuss social determinants of health, disparities, and all of that is building up the capacity of workforce development people, right? Staff. Am I correct? Oh, I forgot to tell you I'm a preacher. Y'all say yes, no, nod your head or something. So when we at the Sedgwick County Health Department look at workforce development, we're looking at internally developing staff. My mantra this year is keep learning. And I'm going to add, keep learning, keep growing. We look internally to build that capacity. I am in charge of doing the assessments every year. PH wins. We are the county. Where is she at? We are the county. There you are. That didn't have enough participants. 33 more people. But we intend to do better, number one. Number two, I think we had a bit of fatigue, survey fatigue. We saw it from PH Wins, we saw it from KDH&E, and they looked at me and said, could you possibly, I almost got fired because I told them, no, we can't do it. But we do assess annually, and we do analyze that, and we put together a workforce development plan that includes the internship, the application, that includes the unnatural causes. Class is included in that plan. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but we put all of that in that plan, and every 2 years we go back and we revisit it. So I'm pulling some things from here, and next year, if I'm allowed back, I'm going to talk to you about my team, my workforce development team that's going to help me with all of this. Shirley.
Any questions for this group? Yes.
So I don't know if it is a question or a comment, but I think about public health, workforce development. So my previous job, I actually worked at the Workforce Development Center in Minnesota, and I credential international medical professionals, meaning putting them through, doctors putting them through from the ECFMG into residency. And so I think when we talk about public health specifically, there are very unique things that public health can do, but let's not lose focus before we throw ourselves into that silos that we're trying to come out of. So we should try as much as possible to coordinate these services with the workforce centers throughout the state as well. One, I think we will gain more participation when we can decentralize our services to be into the workforce centers, and also inviting those workforce centers to work with us as well. Thank you all for what you do. Keep doing what you do.
So just a clarifying question, the workforce centers that you're describing, those are?
The one with the Department of Commerce?
Okay, okay. Okay, those centers, gotcha, very good. Okay, thanks for clarifying. Okay, anyone else for this group? Okay, thank you all very much.
Okay, it takes me a long time to think up my question. My question's for Stacy. So you mentioned that you have these, that you're doing these leadership training classes. You mentioned for the community partners and your staff. Are community partners taking you up on this?
Yeah, we've had some in-house people from Burt Nash and BNA through that first session of Leadership 101.
I just think that there's tremendous capacity and opportunity in that. As we have this 3.0 mindset, we're constantly trying to build our community partnerships, right? And so often what we're trying to do is get them to come to our table or get a seat at their table, but we don't often come with a value add, and that's such a really neat opportunity that you guys are doing. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We have one more group, Lori and Aaron. You want to come up, please? I think Lori and Aaron are going to highlight a bit more about some of the efforts that MTIC is undertaking that benefit all of the states in Region 7.
So good afternoon. This has been an impressive day. You guys are doing so much work together. And I guess the story that we have to tell is not a success story of yet, but it's a story of progress. And it's one where we're really trying to not check the boxes on training plans, but really be able to show accountability and be able to show impact and be able to show outcomes. And that's what we're working with in Iowa right now. So one thing before I tell you this story, one thing I'd like you to do is just kind of reflect back on one training that you've been to that has been engaging, very relevant to your job, that has changed or increased your skills or your learning or changed your attitude in some way, and then that you've had the opportunity to go back and take that skill or that knowledge and directly apply it to what your job is. And I'll get back to that in a few minutes. So now on with the little short story. So about eight months ago, one of our health departments contacted us, and they were like, okay, we have already been through this assessment, workforce development assessment with you guys. We helped create it, we implemented it, and now they've got a workforce development training plan, and they're like, you know, we've done trainings before, but now we really want to know how we're going to implement this training plan. And so we decided that through that conversation, we would invite in other local public health departments and the state health department, if they want to be involved, and start to plan this, start to come up with a way that we could really show how these plans were being implemented. And so we have 6 local health departments, 4 of which are accredited 2 are seeking accreditation, and then our state health department is at the table with us too, and they have become accredited since last December. So we started off kind of rocky because we didn't know exactly how to tackle this, and we have talked to people across the different states on what they were doing with implementing their training plans. And in fact, we just had a conversation with Ohio, thinking that they were going to be way out there, and they said, no, we aren't, really looking into how people are implementing their training plans. So we started off having conversations about, okay, let's share what the training plans look like. Can we see where commonalities are? Can we see where differences are? And hopefully bring us together in a way that's going to be impactful. So we looked at the training plans. We saw a lot of commonalities because they were all using the Ohio template for training plans, which is great, and that was perfect. Some of them kind of implemented other little pieces to that, depending upon what they were already doing with their health department. And then we took a step back and we said, okay, we're going to have an evaluation plan. So being very academic-y, we put together an evaluation plan, which was pretty much really high level and had a lot of moving parts and was based off of a logic model, which was okay, but it's like, okay, there's a gap. You have to take that and you have to really put it into practice. And so we had all the pieces there, and they liked those pieces, but it was like, okay, this is kind of overwhelming. Let's take another step back and talk about what are people doing with the actual evaluation. What tools are they using? What questions are they asking? What are they getting at? And so we brought together some of those tools, and Aaron's going to talk a little bit about that on the research that he's done with pulling together certain tools. Everybody has tools put together, but we're trying to see how can we implement something that is very effective. Are we asking the right questions? And that's what it gets down to, is really taking that step back and asking, are we being effective? Is this changing our workforce? Is there more productivity? Is there more engagement? What are we doing? What are we seeing? What are we feeling? What are they feeling, hopefully, from these different workforce activities? So we just had another meeting and with the entire group, and then we met on Friday with one of our public health. He's a systems analyst, and he was the one that contacted us about implementing the training plan, pretty much because he's responsible for implementing their training plan at Johnson County Public Health in Iowa City. And so we had this conversation with him. Where do you feel like we should be going now? Because it seems like we're still treading water. And he said, let's do this. Let's take the workflow plans that people have in place. So we're starting with the approval justification forms. So when a staff member wants to get something, an external training approved, what do they have to do? And what does the supervisor have to be looking at to say yes? Is there criteria that they have to meet to say, yes, this training is good. We want to be able to support you financially to go to this training. From there, what are we looking at? We're looking at the impacts. So what kinds of questions do we need to be asking once they come back? What are their goals? How are they going to apply it? What do we have to do as an organization to be able to support that person to be able to apply those skills right away? Because we know that if they're not going to do it right away, you're only going to retain 15% of what you learned. But if you have that ability to do some preparation, then the training, and then the post support, you're going to have 100% retention. So it's thinking about that and looking at the continuum. So that's the next step that we're doing, is we're trying to look at the workflows. We're trying to look at all the tools that are in place and see where we have some gaps, how we can make this flow better. And then at the end of the day, looking at the systems that are in place. Okay, financially and budget-wise, is this all adding up? Were these good investments for us within our workforce to be able to fund these trainings? Is there one training that sticks out that maybe everybody should have, or maybe everybody in a certain department should have? That's kind of I think that's the path that they really want to focus in on. And then the last piece of this is, how do we communicate this to our leaders? How do we communicate this to the health director? Because we are looking at it in one direction. How do we get our leader on board to really support what's going on? How do we tell the story? How do we tell our Board of Health? In Iowa, we have boards of health. How do we tell our Board of Health at the end of the day that this money is really promoting our workforce? These are the things that we're building capacity in, and this is where we need to continue to go. So that's kind of our story. So in order to evaluate the workforce, when they're going to trainings, one piece of that is to use a model. It's called a Kirkpatrick evaluation model. You probably have all heard of it. And think of it as a pyramid. So the first level of the pyramid is to measure how much did that individual going to that training engage? Were they engaged? Did they feel like it was relevant to their job? Did they take away things? The next piece of it, which is much harder to measure, is their change in knowledge. So you can measure that with a pre-test, post-test, or the other way to measure it is with their confidence. Do they feel like they'll be able to do or apply these objectives, whatever the objectives are for that training? The third level then is measured a little bit later, and that's, did we change behaviors? Did going to that training change a behavior? Are they now implementing or internalizing pieces of health equity into their everyday jobs? And then the fourth level, which is beyond that, but it's more the outcomes. What is this doing for us to build capacity, for our organization to build capacity and accountability? So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron now to talk a little bit about the research that he's done.
Yeah, I thought I was going to get away without talking about this one so pretty much what I've been researching is like, every time I get into the research, I feel like I'm going down a rabbit hole. So I'll go for quality improvement, and then it'll be all the culture following that, or then it'll be tied to a leadership role. And then everything kind of starts with leadership, and then that also has to do with implementation and change management. So it's really hard to get out of those, like that blinders where I'm doing the research. So, because everything really sims off of each other. And I guess when I kind of jumped into the FAB accreditation thing and like kind of midship, so when I was doing the first call, I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that they wanted to help with implementation tools. And I guess everyone has different ideas about what an implementation tool is, because when I called Colorado, they didn't really have any ideas of what an implementation tool would be. And so then I was like, oh, well, I think I think you do know what it means. I don't think I'm explaining it well enough. So I think that's the hard part, is finding something that like everyone understands, and like everyone who's on different levels of accreditation. How can you have an hour-long presentation to someone who's on the very beginning of accreditation and someone who's on the very end of the accreditation? And how can you make it good for everyone? And what we did was we found specific questions that we could do for like the, I can't think of the model. Yeah, the level 1, level 2, we couldn't really think of anyways, because you really have to be a part of that learning opportunity to understand the objectives and the questions to really ask. And level 3 would be a little easier, and that's more, you look at how they're implementing it in the office and like asking questions and interviews and how they can do that. And level 4 is just seeing if it actually like works. And then also level 5, which is in the Phillips model, is just like the return on investment. And everyone liked the questions, but really it was, how can we do practical methods? And finding those practical methods, you kind of have to go out and look in the field, because there's not a lot of, it's all theoretical. And then when you're presenting that theoretical evidence to local health, it's really hard, because they want to see, well, what is the specific thing that I can see in the actual workforce? And I think that's right now what we're trying to find, is more practical experience and how we can implement these. into the FAB.
I think you bring up a good point, though, about how it blends in and how it threads through quality improvement and performance improvement and strategic planning and thinking about that. So there's so many gears that are turning in order to put all of this together in a very cohesive way and to simplify it and not make it so complex that we're not going to be able to do it. And I think that's where we're at now. So we're continuing to grapple with this, and hopefully maybe next year we'll have more. But I think we're going to get closer and closer, because I know Johnson County Public Health has to have their plan implemented in December. So that's where we're at. I don't know. Any questions or experiences that you guys have, or do you guys have implementation plans in place for your workforce development plans? We're all there. Thanks.
Thank you, Lori. I think it's a really good point to think about. It's great to do the plans, and then they're finished, and we can, yes, say, we have a workforce development plan, but then somehow translating that into action, the next steps can be really challenging.